Mr. Ahmadi, Ramadan Kareem, and thank you for joining me. I would like to start by going back to 1999, where around 1.5 million Kosovars were kicked out by Serbian forces. Everybody remembers the long lines of refugees, of people and tractors who were trying to flee to Albania and to Macedonia. Now we see another refugee crisis, millions of refugees, but this time Ukrainians leaving into Poland, into Romania, into Hungary. What were your feelings when you saw this new tragedy?
Well, it brought back memories. As you said, during the 90s, over 50% of the Albanian population were deported violently from Kosovo in a military operation from the Serbian government called the Horseshoe, meaning that the only way forward open would be towards Albania, where most of the refugees left, among other countries such as Northern Macedonia now and Montenegro. It was genocide. It was a genocidal project. Thousands of people were killed, raped, hundred thousands of houses were burned. And we see the same war crimes going on now in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And of course, it brought back memories, and Kosovo, the Republic of Kosovo's institutions immediately on the 24th of February condemned the military aggression of the Russian Federation, and also the invasion and the illegal recognition of the so-called independence of the two regions of Ukraine. We were among the first countries to join the sanctions put up by the United States, United Kingdom, European Union, and other democratic countries. So it was another dilemma for us in this regarding this issue.
Mm-hmm. And concretely, what can Kosovo as a small nation do to help the Ukrainians?
Well, we took steps towards that too. For example, we we're hosting 20 journalists, Ukrainian journalists, and not only hosting them as persons, but their families. And we are creating the conditions for them to work from Kosovo. Besides this, we have committed to accepting and hosting 5,000 refugees. You have to understand that Kosovo is relatively small in population and territory in comparison to other countries such as Poland and others. Also, we have temporarily lifted the visa regime in order for the Ukrainian refugees to be able to come in easier into Kosovo, but also to transit, because we had, in the first days of the war, we had a lot of requests to permit the transit of refugees through Kosovo to other countries, mostly to Albania. So now they can easily travel through or into Kosovo. Also, we have taken decisions to help with humanitarian aid, and that is still ongoing. So there's a number of helpful measures that Kosovo is taking, of course, always in regards to its capacities.
Mm-hmm. All Kosovo refugees were allowed to go back home after 78 days of NATO bombing of Serbia. How do you think the international community can get the Ukrainian refugees back home as soon as possible?
Yes, well, the war in Kosovo started prior to the NATO bombardment of the military points of former Yugoslavian army, Serbian army. And the final phase of that liberation war was also when NATO intervened. And right after that, the Serbian army left Kosovo. So we could all come back. And it looks like Russia is failing to its project into Ukraine. And now we see news that the number of refugees is going back to the territories within Ukraine, which are now safe and secure. And I believe sanctioning the Russian Federation continuously, also Belarus, and helping the Ukrainians in a variety of ways would help to conclude this war with Ukrainian victory. And
do you think NATO should intervene just like what happened in Kosovo in 1999, or do you think it's much more complicated because Russia is a nuclear superpower while Serbia is not, obviously?
we as a country have NATO within Kosovo with the KFOR mission, and as a democratic country, our goal is to become a part of NATO. Today is NATO's 73rd anniversary of its establishment, and we look forward to, as soon as possible, be a full member of NATO. But towards that, gain a PFP, a partnership for peace program, but also be part of the regional security measure called Adriatic Charter, which is established by the United States. And I believe within that context, when we are a member of NATO, we could give our opinion on such issues. Helping the Ukrainian army and Ukrainian civilians, all the institutions, as the Western countries have done until now, I believe that would help to bring an end to this war and learn a lesson for the Russian Federation. That
you spoke about your country joining NATO. Is there anything concretely being done, or like, did you speak to Brussels about that? Is there anything concretely being done about that?
Yes, we are working. We are doing the so-called homework to get ready for that. But we have to understand that it is a process and it does not happen overnight. But we have close cooperation, especially with the United States Army. Like, for example, we have co-deployed some of our soldiers in Kuwait with the Iowa National Guard Army. So there are steps that are being taken to deepen and widen our relationship, but we have to understand that to become a full member of NATO, it takes time.
Is there a certain deadline? Because now everybody is saying there are many voices that say Kosovo, also Bosnia, should become immediate members of the EU because of the current situation.
There's no deadline, so to say, procedurally, but I believe as soon as Kosovo becomes part of NATO, that can only help the regional stability. It's not only in the interest of Kosovo, it is in the interest of the Balkans, and therefore in the interest of the European stability, because we have to know that we have a Russian proxy in our borders, which is Serbia. Serbia has a lot of connections, not only historical, but also current connections to the Russian Federation, being those militarily, economically, and we have seen that from this part of the world, it is only Serbia that has not aligned and taken sanctions against the Russian Federation or Belarus. And it is.
I want to speak more about that, but first let me ask you: do you think I know you're saying you're talking about joining NATO, but this is not happening yet. Do you think in the meantime, Kosovo needs more KFOR forces, NATO troops, to keep the situation calm on the ground?
Within our cooperation with NATO and also the US Army, we have proposed a number of steps that could be taken. KFOR here has a number of soldiers, and I believe there's no risk of instability within Kosovo, from within. But also we have a long-term proposition that we make to the United States publicly. We invited them to have a permanent military base in Kosovo. Currently, they have the Bonsteel base, which is not permanent, but we believe that having a permanent military base would contribute to stability in Kosovo, but also in the region. But I have to say, there's no risk coming from within. The risk can only come from our north, which is our northern neighbor, which is Serbia.
Did you ask for more steps to be taken other than the permanent base?
The permanent base has been an invitation standing even prior to the invasion, the military aggression of Russian Federation. But having this permanent base, having Kosovo progress towards partnership for peace and then becoming a full member of NATO would help Kosovo and also the region and Europe.
In your opinion, what kind of destabilizing scenarios could we see in Kosovo?
Serbia has a number of forward operational bases of its army in the borderline with Kosovo, who are on high status, high alert status. We have seen in the end of last year when we decided as a government to have reciprocity regarding car license plates. We have seen Serbia flying airplanes donated by Russia in our border, provoking the situation, gathering its army. So you never know with them. Even with trivial issues, they might provoke. But I believe this is a reality not only for Kosovo, this is a reality for other neighboring countries which are at risk from Serbia. Serbia is a factor of instability in the region, not a factor of stability, because they do not work towards peace, but they work towards provocations. But the Kosovo
how are you preparing for a possible unrest?
The Kosovo institutions are being vigilant, and we are not alarming. It's not an alarming situation, but we are being vigilant and monitoring the situation.
Are there any concrete steps that you took on the ground in order to prepare for any possible unrest?
There is no indication of possible unrest. As I say, the risk does not come within. So, but our security forces are working as always, and the situation is stable and under control.
I want to speak about Bosnia, because they have a little bit the same situation like you, with Bosnian Serbs who get support from Serbia and from Russia, and they have threatened to separate from Bosnia. Are you in touch with the Bosnian government in Sarajevo and coordinating actions in order to keep the Balkans quiet?
We are in contact, among other neighbors, also with authorities of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we can coordinate as much as there is space, because you have to know that the system that they have does not allow them to coordinate more closely with Kosovo because of Republika Srpska, headed by Dodik, the Vučić ally. So it is not as easy because of them, but we have close coordination with the other parts of entities of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it is a pity that after so many years, we still have to deal with the risks coming from the hegemonic project of Serbia, which is in the framework of the so-called Serbian world, which is similar to the Russian world that we're seeing being now in Ukraine.
Some people are saying because the Serbian side and the Serbian and the Russian side are now weakened because of Russia's losses in the Ukraine. Do you think, since Russia is the main ally of Serbia and since they are vulnerable right now, do you feel there is a chance for a permanent deal on Kosovo between your government and Belgrade?
There can be no deal on Kosovo between Kosovo and Serbia. We have declared independence in 2008, and we are an independent country. There can be an agreement on which we are working between Kosovo and Serbia. And this agreement, we believe, should be centered around mutual recognition, as President Biden has stated many times. So we are, as you know, in a dialogue process in Brussels, which is not progressing because of the unconstructive steps that Serbia is taking. From our side, we have proposed 6 agreements, which some of them have not even been taken into consideration by Vučić, and others are being rejected or hindered in a way or another. So, but we are willing to continue that process. But I have to say, it would be the best scenario that we recognize each other, but we can continue living without Serbia's recognition. Kosovo is having a high economic increase, its exports are increasing, the corruption is getting lower, we are fighting crime. So these are the priorities that the citizens want us to work towards. Our government has come to power with over 50% of the votes because of 2 commitments, and those commitments are jobs and justice.
During negotiations, both sides have to make compromises. Would you make territorial compromises whereby territory held by the Kosovo Serbs would go to Serbia?
We have to understand that history does not start with this government. Kosovo has made compromises since 2008. And no, territorial exchange, that's a big no from our government. And that would only lead, besides not being a solution between the relations between Kosovo and Serbia, that would only lead to destabilization of the entire region.
Could Northern Kosovo and Mitrovica get a special status within Kosovo, for example? Because you need to get out of the deadlock and you kind of need to have new ideas. Are these ideas that you have on the table, or is this a no-no for your government?
I have to say that these ideas are not new. These ideas are old. And these ideas have been rejected until now. We had a moment, a brief period, that some of our officials were considering such ideas, but that is why they are not in power anymore. And these ideas cannot progress. We are a multi-ethnic country. Our citizens live with each other. Besides looking at their ethnicity, these, like, for example, these kind of request for autonomy of certain regions or a third layer of power never came from Serbian citizens of Kosovo. These are projects of Serbia at first to undermine the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Kosovo, and also to always have a leverage of destabilizing Kosovo and the region. So there can be no peace with such projects. We as a government do not look at our citizens through their ethnicity. We look at them all the same, and we believe that we can live together.
Is there any change from the Serbian side? I mean, judging by the current situations, do you feel Belgrade is ready to make compromises?
Now the elections have just ended yesterday in Belgrade. They have a new mandate. I would call to them to consider the situation. Kosovo, they have to acknowledge the fact that Kosovo is an independent state recognized by most of the UN members, and it is a reality that will not go away. So as soon as we reach a legal binding agreement centered around mutual recognition, that is better for both of the countries.
I see. My last question to you: Kosovo is a small nation, and currently you have peacekeeping troops in your own country. If there is eventually a peace deal in the Ukraine and all sides agree to send international peacekeepers to Ukraine, would Kosovo accept to do that as well?
Yes, we have shown our willingness on the first days that the Russian aggression, military aggression started in Ukraine. We have shown our willingness that whatever our partners decide to do regarding sending troops during or after the war, we are ready to contribute. So yes, Kosovo is ready.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.